All right, so last night I was sitting here, three sheets to the wind, and I started thinking to myself, what did I really get out of college? Why did I spend half my life sitting in a university classroom learning outdated facts from people that still think it's the 1900s and that education is power? Because the reality of that is completely untrue. I didn't learn one useful thing while I was at the university. I've never earned a thin dime for my university education. As I've said before on this channel many times, a university education is the cover fee for 6 out of 10 jobs in America. They don't care about your skills, regardless of what they say about skills first. Everyone has the same basic information inside of their skulls, right? It's called common knowledge. And that's what they want. They want people who can do the job on day one, but you're not going to get that kind of information into your noggin from a college degree. That just doesn't happen. Where you get that knowledge is from actually doing that job. And they're not going to let you do that job without being able to do it first. And that's the catch 22 of our job economy of education. Because I sat here last night thinking to myself, what happened? I was supposed to be successful at this point in my life. I should have been looking forward to retirement really soon. But instead, I spent my whole life working at the dollar store, working at the Dollar Tree. And you ask yourself, why did this happen? Why did I fail so miserably at life? And it's simply put, they wanted you to go into the corporate education system. They needed you to spend your money there, giving you this what these unrealistic expectations, these unrealistic goals of where your life is going to be. And if you ask any Gen Zero right now who just graduated, because there's tens of thousands just from down the street, and there will be again every semester. It's a mill of people coming out with useless education, looking for the good jobs that they're never going to get. In fact, when I look at most young people and I see the fact that they're well spoken, they understand what's going on, and most likely they're going to enter the cycle that I did when it comes to employment. There's no gainful employment in this society for a large swath of us. We don't have access to it. Despite our fancy education, there is no place for us because there are a very limited number of good jobs out there. And when you stop and think about how many job interviews you've been to, I've personally been to hundreds, if not 1,000 job interviews. I'm seeing people on the internet posting that they've submitted thousands of resumes. And years later, they're still unemployed with 10 plus years of experience in whatever field that they were doing before they got laid off. And it's sad to say that most of those people will never go back to work. In fact, my friend Charlotte, when her husband last year lost his job after working for the same place for 10 years, they just came in one day and they told him, we got to lay you off. You're making too much money. And they sliced up his job and gave it to interns. And he didn't know what he was going to do. His family needed him to provide that $120,000 salary that he was making. And he was never going to see that kind of money ever again. And that's what's happening to many people out there, is that you're falling down, just like in 2008, in the financial crisis, where people were working these really good finance jobs. They disappeared overnight. And these people, well, when you're not making money, you become invisible. Let's just face it. Every time you look at a homeless person with the sign on the side of the road, you don't see a person anymore. We have become that kind of society. We no longer look at people that need help and think to ourselves, that could be me. Most of us are keeping our heads down and pretending they're not there, because it's the easiest way to deal with life when you just assume that it's not there, that there are no problems. And this is what this channel is all about, is talking about these things that no one wants to talk about because they're ugly and there are no solutions. Talking point number one. You can Google the entire curriculum of a $60,000 degree, but they'll still tell you the value is in networking. Yeah, the same kind of networking that ends with you serving coffee to someone who inherited the job you wanted. The collapse of higher education isn't about ignorance, it's about exposure. The illusion broke when students realized that the only thing that they were really learning was how to stay in debt. That's what I learned. I didn't get anything out of my classes. In fact, especially in archaeology and anthropology, there have been hundreds of discoveries since I got out of school that all never would have made it into a textbook. I remember now looking at a skull of one of my books, one of my textbooks, and thinking, you know what? They found that 10 years ago. Why is it on the cover of my textbook? And the reality is that they can't keep printing textbooks in real time. The textbook is no longer the gold standard of learning, and it hasn't been for a long time. Ever since the internet killed books, there's no value in research books. Science moves too quickly. And that can be said about almost everything that relates to education, especially in the traditional liberal arts education, which, in my opinion, has no place in our society for anyone that isn't filthy rich. Because remember, education wasn't created for you and me. Education was created for people who didn't need money. But suddenly, people who didn't have money wanted the privilege of going to school. Well, did you hear that word? Privilege. People were burying themselves in debt for the privilege of getting a university education because they thought that because they saw those other people who were getting ahead in life because of their degrees in English literature, which I have, and they wanted that privilege. Well, you don't have the privilege to go to school. When the Department of Education was created to allow student loans for less than suitable candidates, that was a disaster because these people were coming out of these schools. They didn't have the connections like rich people did to the good jobs in life. So they were coming out with an overpriced education that wasn't going to lead them anywhere. And I'm a perfect example. If I've been a minimum wage worker my entire adult life with 4 of these piece of crap degrees, it means that it has no value. The only reason I've been able to hold my head above water for as long as I have is because I became very good at teaching myself how to do things. That's why I throw myself into all my weird hobbies: photography, mountain biking, fish keeping, whatever it is. But everything I learned about fish keeping in the last 6 weeks, I've learned from watching YouTube channels on fish keeping, aquascaping, water quality. It's all there. You're not going to go out and buy a textbook on aquariums right now. That just doesn't exist. Maybe in the 70s or 80s it did, but not anymore. And that's why they're holding on to this outdated model to continue to have customers. You're not a student, and you never have been. When you enter the university system, you are a customer. You are someone that they want to exploit for as much money as they can. That's why they have these retention programs. It's the first thing that happens at universities. They try to retain you because first year retention is awful at a university because a lot of people come into the system and realize, oh my God, this is a scam. Textbooks, parking, dorms, food passes, cafeteria passes for really crappy food. Almost every university I've been to has a cafeteria and the food's awful. That's why it's called cafeteria food. Anyhow, let's get on to talking point number 2. They teach you to memorize, not to question, to pass, not to understand. You pay to be molded into a professional who doesn't flinch when told you're lucky to even have a job. It's corporate conditioning disguised as intellectual pursuit. The fluorescent prequel to your fluorescent cage. The diploma isn't proof of brilliance, it's proof of endurance that you can survive 4 years of intellectual gaslighting and still say thank you at graduation. That's absolutely 100%, especially with my psychology degree. I didn't learn a damn thing. I memorized the PowerPoint presentation, you filled in the bubbles, and you passed. And you passed, and you passed, and then you got to the end of 4 years and you realize I'm not in the top 5% of my class. I'm just not that smart. Boom. The avenue to graduate school is closed. That's what they don't tell you, is the whole time that you're in direct competition with everyone around you for those top educational positions in grad school. And if you're not smart enough to go to grad school, don't even start. Because as I've said on this channel 100 times, 9 out of 10 college students do not belong at a university. They belong at a community college learning something useful, something that they can actually use to go get a job that pays them $1 more than minimum wage. That's where those people belong. And even when they get to community college, some of them may not be smart enough for that. Because at least while I was working for the engineering college, they can't have people who come out of their community college and not know what they're doing. That's bad for your brand. So you have to have standards. And these standards weed out the vast majority of people because you don't want them. You want people who are going to be able to complete your program, not only for profit, but for your brand. You don't want your brand to get tarnished by continually bringing in students who fail out of school and drop your graduation rates. You don't want those people. And a lot of people aren't willing to dedicate themselves to education the way that you have to. They think everything is supposed to be handed to them. And that's not the way it works. As a person who spent hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours doing homework, it's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to weed out the weak, but it's not profitable to weed out the weak. So you got to let in more and more and more of your weak customers. And then it tarnishes your brand. But it is what it is, right? We don't go to school to learn how to be good at life. There's nothing at university that you learn that's going to make life easier. They don't teach you the basics of how to pay your bills, how to be in a positive relationship, how to even find a job. None of that happens. I went to so many interviews not knowing what I was supposed to say in the interview. I remember my first one out of college. I was interviewing at ADP, and they asked me where I saw myself in 5 years. And I said, not here, back at the university. And that was the instant. You could see both of the people interviewing, their faces just go cold. Like, well, we want people who at least will smile and nod when you ask the question, are you going to be here in 5 years? They don't want to be interviewing again. And if you give them that sort of attitude in the interview, they're going to just think, oh my God, this person's just coming and going, right? That's why you have such high turnover rates all over this country, because people are coming, realizing, I'm not going to get ahead here, moving on and moving on and moving on. And then suddenly you're 20 years into your job careers. Well, careers is a ugly word here. I wouldn't call it careers, into your employment. And you realize that you don't have anything to put on your resume. You can't put Taco Bell on your resume. You can't put the Dollar Tree on your resume. You can't put the car wash on your resume. Your resume is supposed to show your employer that you know how to do stuff. And many people are showing up to these job interviews with nothing on those resumes. And it is really hard because I remember my last year of my psychology degree. It was the only class I've ever had where they actually mentioned resumes. And I'd say half the class wanted to work at Petco after they got out of university. And that's what they expected. The professor didn't expect anyone in that classroom to work anything higher than retail work. In fact, she said that to the classroom. But I could see that my fellow students and future workers didn't have the ambition for more. They realized that they didn't have the skill set to become a NASA scientist or become a business owner. The kids that were going to be successful at life were going to be successful without those 4 years of experience. It didn't matter. The kids who were not going to be successful, including myself, are the people that had no connections, no one in their family to take care of them, and no one to help them. We all failed at life. Wherever my class is, wherever my graduating class is, they've all failed at life. Unless they married rich or somehow had the ability to be within distance of a rich person that would raise them up. Because on your own merit, you're not going anywhere. I mean, we can all walk around in society and see 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and 40-year-olds all working in retail. Why? Because they were set up to fail from the very beginning. There was never a chance that they were going to make it. And this education system needs to be brought to its knees because it doesn't serve anyone. Keep the Ivy League schools open for the elite students, but the rest of them are completely worthless. The way they teach, the way they treat the students, the way they make it seem like this big deal. Like I spent so many years at university that every fall is like homecoming was such a big deal. Pro sports at a university are where the money's at. They're not sitting in a classroom in the basement reading literature. That's Loserville. And that's where I spent so many years, is reading the classics. For what? Is reading the classics really help me do anything in my life? No. In fact, it probably hurt me more than anything. Because you can't just put your head down and accept the fact that things suck. And that you were set up to fail through these liberal art colleges across the entire country. They're not teaching students. They're indoctrinating you into believing that everything's okay. And you're going to be okay. Even though once you finish, you're still working at the Dollar Tree.